Today's episode is a bit of an odd picnic. We're talking cocktails and sandwiches. Only the cocktails are zero proof, and the sandwich is the sandwich generation. We are talking with an entrepreneur and founder of a company called Raising the Bar, which is a zero proof cocktail subscription kit, the first and only in the United States. And the founder is Abbie Romanul. And I am so excited to introduce you to her very personal story of what's behind Raising the Bar, and how she has navigated over these last many years as a co-founder and CEO of a business, while also being a mom and a caretaker to parents in health crisis. I'm your host, Kathy Vines, and this is Surfing the Quicksand. Have you ever known somebody who had the right idea for the right problem at the right time and had the talent and experience and abilities to bring it to life? Well, I know somebody, and today you're going to meet her. Abbie Romanul is my guest today, and she is the co-founder of Raising the Bar, which is the first and only dedicated zero proof cocktail subscription kit in the United States. And in just over 5 years, she has turned this into a multi-million dollar business. This came out of identifying a niche in her own life, given by her own story with alcohol. She's going to share that with us today. And as you might imagine and relate to, in the early part of the pandemic, when alcohol became a big part of a lot of people's lives, she recognized that big gap that was going on for people who do love to celebrate and did want to connect and do want to have engagement and entertaining that often feels like it's around alcohol. And she saw that there was not an easy pathway to do that. Her innovation created this solution that I know when it launched, I was very interested in because I was also paying attention to my own alcohol consumption during the pandemic. We're going to talk about my experience with Raising the Bar, her empire with Raising the Bar, but also her own story as a sandwich generation mom who also during this time was dealing with some very heavy family life. We're going to talk about all of those today because she's very generously sharing her story and her time with us. Welcome, Abbie Romanul.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy.
I also like to say that I knew you before all of this. I'm very lucky. We go back, more than 8 years. And when I first started thinking about people I wanted to have on Surfing the Quicksand, you were very much top of mind for all of those reasons I just talked about, right? You really are someone who has gone through a number of things and had a number of successes, and all together at once balancing them with family and being a daughter of a sick parent. And I think your humanity and vulnerability and how you've shared your story publicly already is so going to be so helpful for folks today.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I want to start with talking about Raising the Bar and why the idea came about for you. Where did it come from? How did you create it? What can you tell us?
Yes. So it will be, my goodness, 8 years this December that I decided to quit drinking. Drinking had been something that was in my life since really early teenagerhood. And as a young kid and young teen, I felt a lot of social anxiety. And I remember the first time I had that first sip of alcohol feeling like, oh, here is something that can kind of just make things feel a little easier and a little lighter. And that was a tool and really a crutch that I carried through with me into my college years, into my 20s, and into my 30s. And I think, for a long time, the conversation was, are you an alcoholic or are you not an alcoholic? And over the years, as I started to question my own drinking and I tried to put myself like, which bucket am I in? Am I an alcoholic or am I a normal drinker? I realized that neither of those things felt right to me, neither of those definitions. I tried AA, tried different groups over the years. And I remember at some point along my journey in this consideration of, is this something that I can keep in my life? I read an article about gray area drinking. So essentially, this idea that there can be an in between. You don't need a clinical label to know that alcohol is a problem for you or creating problems in your life. And I think when I was finally able to understand that there wasn't this black and white definition, truly a gray definition, something clicked. And that was, I think, for me, a turning point in making the decision to finally remove something from my life that was a challenge for many, many years.
Yeah. I'm curious about the article. Had you been looking for something and that article came up in your
Mm,
research, or was it just like flipping through Cosmo and there it was? Like,
that's a great question. I'm sure it was an article online. I believe the person who coined the term, or at least brought it into, the mainstream, was Jolene Parker. And I'm sure that various internet searches brought me to that as I was scrolling somewhere, but it found me at the right time. And it really did redefine how I approached this challenge.
yeah, sounds like the universe's algorithm there.
Always, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So,
So this is 8 years ago, still well before the pandemic, still well before Raising the Bar is going to come about. At this point in time, you're in brand marketing. You're a brand marketing manager working in consumer products and bringing ideas to life in that space. So how do you go from I'm working full time in consumer goods and I'm just kind of keeping an eye on my drinking and it's very mindful to that next chapter where raising the bar starts to become an inkling for you?
yeah, so I will say at the time that I was working in that role in brand marketing, I was working for a consumer packaged goods company making baby products. And I distinctly remember the before and after from when I was in that role drinking versus when I quit drinking. And I knew that the kind of drinking corporate culture was a problem and something that definitely I played into. But once I made that decision and got feedback from other people in my workplace, I was like, wow, like this is actually, I know this is a stigma, but I am now actively facing like negative feelings from other people about this decision I made. And I always have loved to host. I've loved to celebrate. I like to cook and mix things up. And I loved making cocktails and making people feel welcome and festive. And one of the things I really missed immediately was that feeling of being celebratory, being social, having that drink in hand, that almost like prop, that social cue. And I think if I hadn't made that kind of announcement, I could have gotten away with holding, drinks that look like something. But what was very much still felt at the time was like, if you make the choice not to drink, something is wrong with you. This is not normal, and there is judgment. And so I think part of what prevented me from making that decision for a long time was that feeling of stigmatization. And then to actually feel that in the workplace was really, really interesting.
I,
Um,
as someone who was in human resources for 20 years and left about 13 years ago, I I can I can identify and understand that scenario, right? The
yes,
idea that alcohol, celebration, wooing clients, whatever it is,
yes,
alcohol really can become an important thread in a corporate workplace, whether it's
yes,
around how you spend time together outside the traditional 9 to 5 setting, again, how you're interacting with clients or vendors or all
yeah,
sorts of things. So the idea that making a personal choice, by the way, from a gray decision, not a black and white decision, but from a
yes,
gray decision would potentially impact your your reputation at work, your career trajectory, it's really heartbreaking to hear as a former HR person, but I also know
Ugh,
it's very real.
super, super real. And I think one of the things that I will never forget is from a colleague telling me, "Oh, you were so much fun when you drank." Like suddenly who I was as a person was no longer enough. And luckily I had gotten to the point where I was like, this is disappointing. I'm not going to hear this and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna go back to being this other person. But it was incredibly disappointing, but also affirming, like, yeah, I don't, that's not a culture I want to be part of if that's the perception. But I did immediately feel like, gosh, there's got to be some way to still feel part of things, or have something that feels as thoughtful and elevated and intentional as a well-made drink. So this decision for me came December, so right before the holidays, right before New Year's Eve, right before corporate Christmas parties, all of that. And I think that was particularly interesting just because it's a time of year where that type of celebration is more frequent than normal. We're all in festive mood and there's parties and all sorts of celebrations. So I think because of that timing, because of that reception in the workplace, I was really thinking like, gosh, well, what is there for me? Like what fun thing is there for me? And raising the bar was the idea that I really wanted to be around when I quit drinking.
Mm.
And I will remember my husband Devin and I were driving from Boston to Connecticut to visit some college friends for a New Year's Eve party. And these are our college buddies, our drinking buddies. And Devin and I had 2 hours in the car. Grandparents were watching the kids to kind of chat things through. And literally on that drive, this was a couple of weeks after I made the decision to quit drinking, the idea for raising the bar came up, including the name. Like the name was set from the beginning, the concept was set from the beginning. And then it took over 2 years to make this a reality. So we can get into that. But it's funny, like it was such a clear gap and thing from the very beginning for
Yeah.
me.
And I love that you and your husband Devin do absolutely talk about each other as co-founders, right?
Yes,
Regardless of
absolutely.
who spends how much time with what idea, right? This has really been born out of your partnership and your marriage at home.
Yes,
So you've got an idea, you still have your full-time job in brand marketing, and we're nowhere near we're nowhere near the pandemic yet, right? We still have a whole year before that goes.
yes. Oh, yeah.
How do you and I think some of it is I feel like it's 2020 when it showed up on the scene, but of course it
Yes.
takes a long, long time for these things to come to life. What was that like?
Yes. So we talked this through, this idea came up, and then we just started chatting about it like as an idea. And in my mind, there was never there was never actually a future where we bring this vision to life. It was like, what a cool idea, because I didn't even think of that as an option for me. And you talk about my partnership with Devin. He's the risk averse one. I'm the risk tolerant one. And I think the thing that was so compelling to me in terms of, okay, we've got to do this, is how much he believed in this idea and in me to bring it to life. And that we have no way of knowing what this could do for us, but like we want to take a little bit of a risk and explore it. So about over the couple years that we were thinking about it, we would bring it up, we'd talk about it, this, that, and the other thing. And finally one day he looks at me and he's like, hey, are we going to do this? Like if we're going to do it, let's do it. If we're not going to do it, like let's give ourselves permission to just move on. And I was like, oh, we could do it. So it was February 2020 when we finally filed the paperwork and started working with a graphic designer and started being like, let's dip our toe in. Like we have to start somewhere. So from my perspective, if we have a logo, if we have branding, like then I can start. I'm a visual person. I can visualize how is this going to come to life. And we got our logo, we got the graphics and all that was so exciting. And then a little something happened in March of 2020, as we all know. I will never forget the email. I believe we received it from the school district on March 13th saying that schools were going to be closed. I think it was for 2 weeks initially. And work obviously was moved to remote, and all of the sudden, Devin and I find ourselves at home. I am pregnant with our third child, who was due in May. We have our 6 and 4 year olds at home. And right now, we're just trying to think, okay, how do we stay home? How do we stay safe? How do we keep our jobs? How do we keep our children educated, but mostly just happy and alive while we try to hold things together? So things really went on the back burner at that point because it just felt like this is, of all of the things, this is not important. Um, so baby was born May. I was on maternity leave, and it was over that summer having that opportunity without work to be at home where we started really playing with recipes and just trying products, starting to get samples from places and exploring what the products and brands and ingredients were like. And then later that summer, we did a trip to the Cape with 2 other families. We all, took COVID tests before we went. And that was when I brought like the prototype. So basically the ingredients that I had settled on for this is what I think our first box will be. Let's get some beta testers. Let's do, a little cocktail party. And that was that. So August was when we did those test boxes, and September was when I was scheduled to return to my corporate job remotely. And the eve of returning to work was when we launched the website. I knew if I go back to work without this live, it's not happening. So we launched with no goals except to just get it online. So that was 5 years ago. And I believe the first month we sold 40 boxes. And that felt like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is incredible. And that was the beginning.
Now, I don't, I expect I probably bought one of your first boxes. I know I was, cheering you on, right? So,
Yes, you
and
were.
sharing with people. But what was going on in my life at this time is we got really close friends across the street from us, and Fridays at 5:01, we were outside their front lawn, right? They would sit on their porch, and my husband and I were, 12 feet back, and we had a weekly happy hour. It was just like getting through the
So
congratulations. We
important
got
to
through the
have that
week.
weekly
Yeah.
connection, something to look forward
Yeah.
to. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was cocktail based, and it would be snack based. And we joked about every week we got it a little better. We bought the
Mm,
outdoor heat lamps. We
mm,
bought electric throws, and we would count like there were almost no weeks throughout the year for that first year that we missed, regardless
yeah.
of weather, right?
Yep.
But drinking became an issue, and I'm going to share this story that their youngest, who was probably a kindergartner around then, um, they said, "Oh, our neighbors are coming over. We're going to have, we're hanging out. We're going to have a hangout on the front lawn." And he said, "Oh, you mean a drink out?" Like the 5-year-old said, "You're going to have a drink out." You're like, "Oh, snap." So
Oh, yeah.
this was, my girlfriend and I, like for us, we started thinking like,
Huh. Yeah.
a box of wine a week. That seems like a lot, right? We were both kind of monitoring our own
Sure.
alcohol. So when this came up from you, I had reached, I said, "Hey, I I don't know if you know Abbie, but I bought this box. Let's try them." And we split up the box, and each week the other one, because your box comes with, several weeks worth of cocktails. Now, it's not a
Yes.
one night party, and we're going to
That's
talk
right.
about that in a minute. So it'd be like, "Oh, you want to try this one? Okay, we're going to try Oh, you know what? We ran out of the club soda for this. I'll go buy another can for next
Mm.
week." And we just kind of added to it. And then next month she bought the box. So it became, we actually instituted it as very much a part of our survival celebration
Mm.
process.
I love that. I love how, first of all, I just love that ritual at all, that connection, that touch point. We had something similar where at 3 o'clock every day we would sit out on the steps and have coffee, and our neighbors would do the same. And those I think were so important to just keeping moving and finding some joy and connection. And I love how it sounds like so seamlessly that ritual incorporated, it was a cocktail. It just happened not to have alcohol. And it's that exact idea of that ritual, that opportunity to connect, and something that is more special than club soda. And club soda is great. Spindrift is great, La Croix is great, but sometimes you want something a little bit more exciting.
I want to give a little bit of detail about kind of what these boxes feel like and what a subscription feels like. So what does that look like today? I know what it felt
Yes.
like 5 years ago. What does it look like
Yep.
today?
So we talk about ourselves as a zero proof cocktail experience. And so yes, it is a product, but what we are trying to offer people is an experience. So the idea of learning about these ingredients, it is a still very much growing and emerging market. And a lot of these things are analogous to things in the traditional alcohol cocktail experience, but some are not. So it's a lot of education about these brands and products and how to use them. And my background before being in marketing was in art history and curatorial work. And so for me, one of the most fun things is the curatorial element. Like, how do things not only taste together and work together, but like, I want that unboxing to feel beautiful and special and like, a fun experience. So, what you get in the box today, if you're a monthly subscriber, you get a box every single month around the 15th of the month. And then there are two different recipes inside. And each of those zero proof cocktail recipes serves at least 4 servings. So you're getting 8 different cocktails. And then we also include 2 ready to drink cocktails. So the other thing we want to demonstrate to people is the kind of depth and breadth of how complicated things can be. Because for some people, they like the steps of mixing up a recipe. That's part of it for them. It is for me. And then for others, they want to pop something in the fridge, chill it, maybe pour it in a pretty glass, maybe not. But we're trying to showcase options within this experience.
I I remember some of my experience. I remember one in particular. We were like, oh, which one? Again, my girlfriend and I are kind of making which one should we make? I'm like, oh, I think I was supposed to make tea 3 hours ago for this one,
Yes,
right? So
yes,
it wasn't. So I appreciate the like. I just want to grab something out of the
yes,
fridge versus like, oh,
yes,
we're having an evening and it starts at 3.
yes.
We've got some work to do. And so it was like, oh, I got to read the question in
That's
advance for
right.
some of
And
those weeks.
it's funny that you say that because the ready to drink thing is something that emerged over time. It wasn't part of the kit back then. So we've kind of listened to the customers as we've gone, understood that people are interested in exploring ingredients in different ways. So that's where the 2 recipes as opposed to one came from, and then the ready to drink. But you are not the only ones who miss that tea step and they're like, oh, darn it.
And I do know, and one of the things, and I'm not sure that this is still a part of your model, so explain it if it isn't, but I would get, on your, hey, listen, we've got extras of February. We're selling
Mm.
one-time boxes, just buy
Hmm.
one. Is that still part of how you are introducing people to this?
It is. So early on, one of the trickiest things I think for any product-based business is, of course, forecasting inventory. So we've gone through spells where we've nailed it and we've pretty much sold through or had a few left over of each month, and then we've gone through periods where we've over forecasted. We've gone through periods where we've under forecasted. But when we do have extras of a month, those go in essentially like our one-time box shop, and you can purchase those individually. A lot of people like them for gifts. So, for instance, if you went to our site today and you saw that the current month's box was not your cup of tea, no pun intended to our earlier conversation, you could go back and start with a different one depending on your flavor profile.
Oh, that's great. You talked about the unboxing. I just also want to share a little personal story, which is you had a couple years ago gone through you know what, these are great for Gen Z and young millennials who are partying, but like zero proof cocktails experience can be for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. And you would kind of put an APB out for people saying, who's up for creating a video about an experience with somebody who's
Yes,
non-traditional.
yes.
And I said, I got one for you. My 80-year-old dad, who for medical reasons can't have alcohol anymore,
Your
but
precious cute dad.
he really enjoyed, right? Like he misses having a glass of
Mm.
scotch, right? Like, and he's got this bottle of Johnny Walker Blue that
Mm.
it's just, getting dust. But so I was like, oh, this actually would be so fun for him. And so we did a whole thing, and I created, it was a really fun cocktail, and we put it in their finest glasses that,
Oh, I
they
love
had
it.
had forever, their antique glasses. And then we did a video with him, and I'm like, Dad,
Yes.
you're an influencer. It's great. But
Yes.
but it brings that point across, like this, the concept of who might want a zero proof cocktail isn't just I'm, I think I'm struggling with alcohol, right? For I know for me, alcohol and getting a good night's sleep
Mm,
no longer married to each other, right? Like
correct. Yeah.
it absolutely impacts my ability to sleep well. So my cutting back on alcohol, both in terms of how often and how much I would drink, very much a part of my midlife women's journey.
Yes, for sure. And I think that is such an interesting point because when I came up with the idea, of course, it was very much like I was zeroed in on what was I going through and what did I want and need. And because I was thinking about it from that perspective and not like, I'd like to start a business, where do I see a gap? So, what was so interesting to me was coming at it from the assumption that the people who are going to want this or relate to this product will be like me. They will be people who no longer drink and they're missing that. And very quickly, it became clear to me that that was not our only audience. And people like your dad who can't drink for medical reasons. There is one testimonial we received once that I will never forget. But it was a husband and wife, and the husband was going through treatment for liver cancer. And they used to have that happy hour ritual every single day. And they maintained that with raising the bar. And like, my goodness, what a beautiful, lovely thing for to go through such a challenging, difficult time and to find a way to retain like a jovial touch point in your day. I loved that. And that's just one of the stories that we've heard over the years. And I'm sure there are many others. But since the pandemic, we've also seen this major shift in drinking culture in general, and not just for those sobriety reasons. Some of them are, aging and how does alcohol impact or metabolize as we age. For some, it's, pregnancy or nursing or trying to conceive. For others, it's I'm just on a mental health journey and I know alcohol does not make me feel good. So why am I doing this? And so it's been really exciting to see that shift. And, I think about it a lot. What would things have been like for me and how would my have decisions been impacted if the culture was more accepting and more inclusive in terms of how people drink back then? But we're here now, and I feel like it's a really exciting thing to see. And just the idea of, how unwelcome and disappointed it felt like people were in my decision back then to now being like, oh, yeah, I don't drink either. Or, yeah, I really don't drink anymore. It doesn't make me feel good. Like there's just like, oh, yeah, rather than that back then felt very palpable.
That it makes a lot of sense. And I think I know I go out and I see very dedicated mocktail selections on
Yeah.
menus more often than not. And as you said, kind of the products in this space are also responding to kind of this shift. And so one of the things I want to hear more about is kind of the business underneath the business for you, which is, yes, you're curating
Mhm.
and you're sampling and doing all the things so that you're bringing great experiences, unboxing and drinking for people. But that involves a lot of research on your part in this zero proof and zero proof cousin industry. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So one of the things that's been so fascinating, like I, did marketing for various different categories, and being in this category is so gratifying because many people come to creating products in this space from their own personal story. And again, they're not all sobriety or recovery or things like that. It could be, other types of health and wellness, or they might have a parent who experienced something and they were prompted to create it. And I have been blown away by the sense of community and celebration and this idea that a rising tide lifts all boats that is felt within the zero proof community. So instead of a feeling of competition or market share, this, that, and the other, it feels very much like this community where everybody is interested in educating about this category, but coming to it from these like really personal perspectives. So I found just a tremendous sense of generosity in terms of brands being willing to send samples and trying, which facilitates that research and that tasting and that testing. So on the one hand, yes, there is a lot of research that goes into it. And then on the other hand, taste is subjective. So I'm really conscious of that. Like I think I have a different palate than probably our core consumer does. And that's another thing that we try to offer within the different recipes. You know, if somebody is really into kind of smoky and sour versus fruity and bubbly, trying to figure out a way to offer something for everybody, even if it's not in this month's box, that diversity of flavor and experience throughout the months. But I have just, in general, to answer your question, found it to be seamless to enter this new world, how widely accepting people are of newcomers, and again, just how generous folks are with kind of sharing their time and resources and their knowledge as everybody is exploring this space.
I my one of my favorite stories about this work from you, and I you know, I'm sure if you're sharing this with your audience, they already know this. It was about, was it about 2 years ago that you had your Los Angeles launch party for a
Yes.
very special collaboration?
Yes, so that was last July, July 2024, which feels like a much longer time ago, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes, so Danny Trejo, the actor, has been sober for over 50 years, and the last couple of years he launched a line of non-alcoholic spirits. So fascinating career. So interested to see how he has extended his career into entrepreneurship. And the quick story is we had a photo shoot that his team was going to do with him, with our box, with the products that would be used for marketing purposes. And the night before the photo shoot, we discovered that it was sitting in a warehouse. It had not been scanned through to the next destination. It did not make it to Los Angeles. And these products that were in the box are branded. Like there was no way that we could source it from within LA for the morning of the shoot. So I was at my oldest son's baseball game when I got this news from my team that the box had not arrived. And within a few hours, I found myself packing up a suitcase with all of the samples that were at my house, and booking a flight to Los Angeles for the very next morning that would get me into LA by 9:30 to be at the photo shoot where Danny Trejo was to provide all the products. That was one of that. I think that was one of the like, like what's happening? How did I
Well,
get here?
again, I love everything about that story because it also speaks to what I said at the beginning, right? Like as a co-founder of a business and having the talent and the experience and ability to bring something to life, it's more than just the launch on day one. It's how do you, as you've built a multi-million dollar business, how do you sustain and how do you grow and how do you shift? And then how do you balance this moment that probably really only could have been filled by you? And and I appreciate that that story starts with, I was at my son's baseball game and this thing came up. And I think that brings me to, I want to shift and talk a little bit about you, the mom, you, the daughter, and what was also going on in the backdrop for you while trying to build this business that you clearly love and feel connected to its purpose and the industry. What was life like for you during this time?
So specifically for that event,
Or,
um,
or during these last few years as you're building this business?
yeah, I will say I think about it all the time. I mean, all of our lives have fundamentally changed since March 2020. That is a fact. No matter what you're doing, no matter what type of work or lifestyle or geography, we are fundamentally changed. And when I was working the job that I was in before launching Raising the Bar, um, I wasn't loving what I was doing. I, on the daily, was like, how am I missing this much time at home with my family for this thing that like feels really dystopian when I step back and think about what I'm doing. Like I wasn't doing anything bad, but I was just like, how did I get here? How did I arrive here? And I, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in like just these incredible, like well-timed moments. And as horrific and devastating as the pandemic was and has been, I am very grateful for this shift in how we think about what matters and how our time is valued and what raising the bar has given me, regardless of how much work and effort and responsibility it is. It has given me a freedom to use my time in the ways that I choose to and get to decide that I have never had before in my life. And so while this is the hardest job I have ever had, and I am learning every day, making mistakes every day, like one could say, why didn't you ship that box earlier? How did you get in this situation? Right? Like there's just going to be things like that. And so while I remember distinctly like being at that game, being like, how did this happen? Like, what am I doing? Also being like, I have the freedom to figure this out. I can get on a flight and go do this crazy thing. And like, will it be a story I have for the rest of my life? Yeah, that's actually pretty fun. Like, I'm not mad about it, really. Um, but I think it's also this sense of like, oh, I'm the one making things happen or not. Right. So a sense of responsibility from a professional standpoint that I'd never experienced, that like I am the final one who is going to make it happen or not. And so I think in a lot of ways it's been, of course, professional growth, but like maybe more than anything, personal growth in terms of stepping up to the plate and becoming the person who needs to run this.
I talk about myself that I say I'm not an entrepreneur, right? I'm a small business owner and I happen
Hard
to
pass though on that.
Um, but the idea of it is on me. Now, I don't have a
Mm,
big team. I don't have people who are relying on me. I don't have, if I stop tomorrow with everything I'm doing, I have some clients who would be disappointed, but they'd move on. But you're further down through that, right? You are an employer and you do have a kind of a sustaining business and investment. And so let's talk about balancing that as a mom and as an adult daughter of a mother who faced a health crisis.
yeah. So there is a phrase that is an AA phrase, even though that did not resonate with me as a program. One day at a time is just a great life motto, regardless of what you're going through. So there have certainly been days where I'm like, what did I get myself into? Like, I don't even know how to move forward. And there is some kind of peace in accepting that some days, like, I did what I could today and that there's tomorrow. Like some days you can't do it all, and that's okay. Um, so, as you mentioned, my mom was diagnosed with ALS a couple of years into the pandemic and went through a 20-month journey with her illness. I'm in the Boston area. My parents are in Philadelphia. And that doesn't seem super far. But when you're a parent to three kids running a business with a husband who also has his own professional life and all of that, navigating that was really fascinating. And going back to what I said, having this freedom that I have never had to kind of dictate my own schedule. Again, I mean, I think about what an incredibly challenging, emotional, logistical time that was. And I got to spend so much time with my mom. I got to help my dad. I got to be there with my brother. I had the freedom and flexibility to show up for her in a way that had it been in the pre-pandemic phase, I never could have gotten that level of flexibility in a typical office environment to go do that. So I it was a horrific experience and I'm so grateful. Like I'm so, so grateful at the end of the day for the amount of time and energy and connection I got to have with her. And I thank entrepreneurship for enabling that.
Yeah. I When I talk to midlife women who are in this kind of sandwich generation and dealing with caretaking of their parents and also dealing with children, and honestly, you're a bit on the younger side of women who have gone through that. Not so many women in their late 30s are facing such a serious illness with their parents and then a loss. But sometimes I want to always remind kind of myself and watchers and listeners of Surfing the Quicksand that it can seem like, oh, people get to do that because they have a certain amount of privilege.
Mm,
And um, quite frankly, sometimes that's true. And sometimes it's, well, no, sometimes we were making really difficult and hard decisions to change our lives.
yeah,
And as you just said, it's probably the hardest job you've ever done is raising the
right.
bar. But what you get out of having created this very hard path is, to an extent, life on your own terms.
100%. Like there's not the stability and predictability of a typical paycheck and, paid time off and health insurance and all of that. But the trade-off there, like you said, is really a huge part of my life. And I think sometimes like what would that have looked like otherwise? And who knows? Maybe I would have quit my job. Like who knows what decisions I would have made differently. But I just I feel really lucky at the end of the day. And that wasn't something I really thought too much intentionally about. Like I didn't seek entrepreneurship for flexibility or freedom to dictate my own schedule. That was more of a like, oh wow, okay, like there are payoffs here, legitimate payoffs. So I think yes, it is really hard and really challenging. But there's very many different types of hard, and they all come with their own payoffs as well.
Yeah. Uh, look, as you know, what I want to focus on in this podcast is helping women get unstuck. And something I always want to make people connect to is the idea of kind of two things. Number one, you might get yourself unstuck, but that isn't forever. And number two, you might be stuck in lots of different places,
Mm.
right? And it isn't just like, oh, yeah, I know I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to
I've
pay it all the
arrived. I'm
rest.
fully
Yes.
actualized. It's yeah.
So I think of you as someone who's very much aware that you're still on a journey. You're not where you're
Work in
going to be.
progress. Yep.
How are some of the ways that that comes into your life every day, whether it's what you're saying to yourself or how you're showing up for your family?
Yeah, I think about this so much, especially now. I think I turned 40 this year. That is a natural inflection point. Losing a parent. So my mom died January 2024. That's a natural inflection point. And um, I just, again, going back one day at a time. Um, but I try to do as much work on just existing in the present as I can, which obviously isn't always realistic. We have to be planning for the future as a business owner, as a parent, as a partner, all of these things. But at the end of the day, when I can come back to like, what is my reality here and now? We live here and now. We don't live in yesterday. We don't live in the future. This is the only moment we are actually living in. Right. It's just so simple and so wild. And I tend to be a very anxious person by nature, and so I'm constantly struggling not to live in the past and replay things. Oh, I wish I'd done that differently or hadn't said that. I try not to live in the future, like what's going to happen, what could happen, and just be here and now. So that's super simple, and it's really hard. Like it's really hard, and constantly working at it. But that's yeah.
I love that. And it's simple, but it, we're not gonna nail that every day. And
No.
tomorrow, if we're lucky, we get tomorrow as a do-over. And
That's
that's
right. If
something.
we're lucky. Yeah. And so if we're not, are you going to beat yourself up on your last day for like all that's no, that's not good.
Yeah. I think a
So,
lot of the folks that I talk to in creating this podcast, this idea of the negative self-talk that women really can give themselves and the opportunity we have to turn those dialogues
mm,
around one conversation at a time, like one negative thought at a time, really can be such an important part of getting unstuck from where we are today.
Absolutely. Completely
I
agree.
want to I want to switch. I want to jump into the quicksand three, which are the questions that I come back. And then before I let you go, I want to come back and talk a little bit more about raising the bar and because I know you have an offer to share with listeners. And so I
Yes.
want to come back to that. So first, let's go to the quicksand three. These are three questions I'm asking everyone that have to do a lot with just the foundation of surfing the quicksand. The first is, what is a tip or a technique that you use to get yourself motivated to do something you've been avoiding?
So I find as part of my 40th year, I got my adult ADHD diagnosis this year, which feels like it has justified and explained so much, and honestly has been like a really beautiful piece of my self-acceptance journey, like knowing this thing about myself. And I've noticed oftentimes I put off things for forever. I just can't wrap my head around it. Like, and so my list becomes long, long, long. I feel guilt and shame about how it's accumulating. And when I am able to, instead of take that long, 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 long list and just put on a piece of paper, here's the one thing, like, this is one. Do not pass go until you've done this thing. You sit down and it's like, oh, that wasn't all that hard. And I've been looking at this for weeks. So I think for me, breaking down into digestible chunks, because it can be really overwhelmed when you're looking at that big picture to know where to start. But if you can start to piece things apart into smaller, more manageable things, then that's where the progress is.
I love that. And I do think there are a lot of women who uh imagine they might have ADHD or know they might have ADHD. And what you probably just said felt very relatable to
Oh
people.
my
I know when
goodness.
I work with people in organizing and I work with a lot of people with ADHD and, we'll work on a space and we'll work on a pile, we'll work on a doom box, we'll work on something for 20 minutes. And we'll say, how long was there? And you're like, that was there 3 years, right? And we just got it done in 20 minutes. Like, yep.
Yeah, I just
We,
got chills.
yeah.
That's, yep.
Yeah, yeah. Next question. If time in history or skills or ability or money were not an issue, what's a job or career you might like to have tried?
Oh my goodness. I would be on Broadway doing musical theater. I grew up loving going to New York, seeing shows. My mom went to the North Carolina School of the Arts, and for a brief time, she did off-Broadway shows in New York as a young woman in her 20s. And I think the thing I've always loved about theater is this idea of just playing around with identity and entertainment and I don't know if it's like, I mentioned the social anxiety earlier. It's almost like when you get to perform, you have this mask on. So you just get to show up and there's this freedom. So I explored that throughout high school and college and, a little bit afterwards. But I think if I could be guaranteed a spot on the stage on Broadway, I'd take it.
I
But
love
I think
that.
that ship has sailed.
Oh, you never
You
know.
never know. You
You
never
never
know.
know. And finally, last question is, if do you have a way to recharge or hit the reset button when life gets chaotic?
This is going to sound super, super simple, but a walk, just walking. I think one of the things that has been the biggest challenge of entrepreneurship is because I'm accountable to me and I'm reporting to me. This is the first time where I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to steal time from myself when I should be doing X, Y, and Z. And so I noticed that, when I was working for other companies, like, sure, I would take a 15-minute walk and just stretch my legs. I'd take a lunch break. And that is something that I have not really been able to give myself permission to do running my own business. And so that is something where it's like, okay, get some fresh air on your face, see some grass, see some leaves, like oxygen, vitamin D from the sun, like super simple, but it it grounds me and brings me back to reality a little bit.
Oh, I love that. And again, I also find that very relatable that gosh, any time I'm spending, I'm in charge. The only way I make money is because I'm making money.
Yes.
So how am I spending? What's the best way to spend this hour? And
Mm.
it can feel selfish. It can feel
Hmm.
limiting for future success by making those choices. And
Yes.
so I can appreciate that you know what it is that connects you to that recharging and that you understand the sacrifice that sometimes you need to make.
And your point about like I should be doing something to make money. Like I think about this so much. Like I came to this business with a mission to redefine happy hour, to bring celebration to non-alcoholic drinking. But very quickly, as you run a business and you're like, okay, the margins have to work. Like I need to be responsible for these things. And when you start to think like, okay, my time should be spent on things that make money, yes, in one sense. And then it's like, oh no, my time should be spent in ways that fill my cup. And sometimes that cup is making money for my business. And other times it is reminding myself that I am a human being with a body and needs and all of that. So it's a constant balance and negotiation with yourself.
It is. And the filling of your cup is a great segue to talking about your business. And although I think it's a much nicer glass than just a cup. So,
Yeah.
if somebody has been listening to this and they are intrigued about what an elevated zero proof cocktail experience is, what do you want them to know?
Yes, you can find us at weareraisingthebar.com or on Instagram at weareraisingthebar. And you can learn more about the experience there, about our story there. And we have set up a code surfing20 for 20% off at the website for your listeners.
That's amazing. Anything they should know about that code? What's it good for? How long it's good
Yes,
for?
so it's off anything on the entire site, whether it's a one-time box or subscription, and that will be live until May 31st, 2026.
Amazing. I really appreciate your generosity with that.
Absolutely. Happy to.
And I'm going to use it myself. I know.
Yay.
And the while we are recording this a little bit before the holidays, this is going to be launching in November. And for a lot of people, as you said before, this time of year is very focused on that kind of celebration experience, and giving people an option like this is amazing. And I'm so appreciative of your
Yes, I
generosity.
thank you. I think especially around the holidays, the idea of being a host who's ready to offer alternatives, this idea of inclusive hospitality is so important to me. And then, folks, again, even if you are a drinker, a lot of people like to stack up before dry January. So if you're enjoying the holiday season and need a little break in the new year, these are great to have on hand.
Oh, I love that. And that's a great reminder that dry January absolutely is a
Yes.
part of a lot of people's
Yes.
experience. And this is perfect for that. Abby, thank
Great.
you so very much. I'm going to put all that information in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and driving, like you don't have to pull over and write that code down and write that URL down. It'll be in the show notes. Having you and sharing your story. And again, I'm so lucky to have feel like I've been cheering you on
Oh.
since the inkling of it all. It was such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, I appreciate all the support over the years and just love the concept of the podcast. And I think this is such a gift to so many people. So thank you.
Thank you. I think I made it pretty clear that I'm a huge fan of Abby and a big, big fan of Raising the Bar. I hope that her story you found interesting and relatable at different points, no matter what you've been facing in your own life as a maybe sandwich generation mom, or just caretaker of parents, or person struggling at work, or person with an idea who always wanted to see something happen that can impact people's lives. I get a lot of inspiration from speaking with Abby whenever I get to do that. And so bringing her to you was a real treat for me. I do hope you go check out her website and take advantage of that really generous promo code that she shared. Even if you're curious, if you are thinking about dry January, if you are thinking about ways to be a really great hostess or host to the people who are showing up at your home this holiday season who might not be drinking, it's a fun, fun way to explore a very different way to celebrate. And I would love to hear if you took advantage of it and what you got out of this episode. Head over to quicksandpod.com and share a comment with me, or feel free to comment wherever you are consuming this podcast. Thanks so much.